As evening settles over the headquarters of his company, Elon Musk sits alone, immersed in the blueprints of his next world-changing innovation. A faint knock at the door disrupts his solitude. Standing in the doorway is a figure he barely recognizes, his estranged daughter, Vivian, now a young woman he hasn't spoken to in years. Her unexpected arrival catches the tech visionary off guard. For a man who has engineered rockets, electric vehicles, and brain interfaces, Musk now faces the most daunting challenge of his life, mending a bond he thought was irreparably broken. Before we dive into this story, let us know in the comments, which state are you tuning in from? The afternoon had faded into evening at the headquarters of one of Elon Musk's enterprises. Most employees had already left for the day, but Musk remained in his office, deeply engrossed in the schematics of an upcoming project. His assistant had gone home, leaving him in the quiet he often preferred for his most creative thinking. Through the expansive windows of his corner office, the setting sun cast a warm glow across the sleek, modern workspace. Papers were spread across his desk, alongside several tablets displaying technical specs and charts. A half-empty coffee cup sat forgotten at the desk's edge, its contents long since cooled. A soft knock broke his concentration, and Musk looked up, mildly irritated. He wasn't expecting anyone, and unscheduled interruptions were rare in his meticulously planned routine. "Come in," he called, assuming it might be a dedicated engineer with an urgent question. Instead, the door opened to reveal a young woman in her early 20s. She hesitated at the threshold, her posture betraying a mix of resolve and nervousness. There was something faintly familiar in her features, though Musk couldn't immediately place her. She was dressed simply yet professionally, dark jeans, a navy blazer over a white blouse, and practical flats. Her brown hair was neatly pulled into a ponytail, and she clutched a leather portfolio under her arm. Despite her youth, her expression carried a gravity that spoke of purpose rather than uncertainty. "I'm sorry for coming unannounced," she began, her voice steady despite a trace of unease. "But I thought this was best done in person." Musk gestured for her to enter, his mind racing through possibilities. Was she a job applicant who had somehow bypassed standard channels, or a persistent journalist with a creative approach? But as she stepped closer into the light, recognition dawned. Though years had passed since he last saw her, the young woman's eyes were unmistakable. They mirrored the ones he'd seen in his own childhood photos. "Vivian," he said, her name escaping his lips in a moment of realization. "I didn't recognize you at first." His estranged daughter nodded, taking a seat across from his desk without waiting for an invitation. The quiet confidence in that small act spoke volumes about her determination. "It's been a while," she said simply. Indeed, it had. Their relationship had fractured during her teenage years, when differences in worldview and personal identity created a chasm neither could bridge. A private rift lingered between them, a tangled web of misunderstandings, hurt feelings, and the complex dynamics often found between strong-willed parents and equally strong-willed children. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the desk, the silence heavy with unspoken history. Vivian carried her father's intensity, but there was something distinctly her own in her demeanor, a quiet resolve, unlike his more commanding presence. "Why are you here?" Musk asked, his tone carefully neutral. He was a man accustomed to controlling situations, understanding variables and outcomes. But in this moment, he found himself adrift without a map. He noticed subtle changes in her since their last encounter, the confidence in her stance, the clarity in her gaze, the air of someone who had found her footing. The child he remembered had grown into a young woman with purpose. Vivian placed her leather portfolio on his desk. "I'm graduating next month with a degree in architecture," she explained. "This is my capstone project." Surprised, Musk opened the portfolio. Inside were detailed blueprints for a building that blended innovative design with practical functionality. The drawings were meticulously crafted, showcasing not just artistic talent but a deep understanding of structural engineering principles. As he studied the plans, his professional curiosity sparked, despite the personal tension in the room. "It's a community center," Vivian continued, her voice warming slightly as she spoke about her work. It's designed to be self-sustaining with minimal environmental impact, serving multiple generations in underserved areas. The central atrium facilitates natural airflow, reducing cooling costs, and the modular rooms can be reconfigured based on community needs. She leaned forward slightly, pointing out specific features. These solar panels are integrated into the roof design, not added as an afterthought, enhancing both efficiency and aesthetics. And this rainwater harvesting system supports garden plots that can grow food for the community. Musk flipped through page after page, immediately recognizing the excellence of her work. The project incorporated sustainable technology in an innovative yet elegant way. What struck him most was how the building's function clearly shaped its form, not as a monument to the architect, but as a thoughtful solution to meet people's needs. "This is impressive," he said sincerely. "You always had a knack for design, but this shows real technical understanding." A faint smile flickered across Vivian's face at the compliment, but she quickly refocused on her purpose. "I didn't come here for approval of my work. I came because of something my professor said when she reviewed this project." She leaned forward slightly. She said great design isn't about creating something perfect in isolation. It's about how a creation interacts with the world around it, how it affects the people who encounter it, how it adapts to changing needs while maintaining its core integrity. Her gaze met his. It made me think about the designs we create for our own lives. Sometimes we're so focused on our vision that we don't see how it impacts the connections around us. The metaphor wasn't lost on Musk. For years, he had pursued his vision of the future with singular focus, sometimes at the expense of relationships that couldn't adapt to that vision. The parallel to their own fractured bond was clear. Musk sat still, absorbing not just her words but the intent behind them. For a man who spent his days envisioning humanity's future on a grand scale, this shift to the deeply personal realm of one relationship felt both foreign and inevitable. "Why now?" he finally asked. Vivian hesitated briefly. "I'm about to become a new person, an architect, a professional. Before crossing that threshold, I needed to look back at the foundation I'm building on." She paused, her voice softening. "Including the complicated one we share." What followed was a conversation unlike any typically held in Elon Musk's office. There were no charts to reference, no data to analyze, no clear objectives to achieve. Instead, father and daughter began the delicate task of unearthing years of misunderstanding and pain. Vivian spoke of how his vision for the future often felt more important than her present, how she grew up in the shadow of innovation rather than the warmth of steady presence, how she made choices about her identity that she felt disappointed him, though they were hers alone to make. "There were times I needed a father more than the world needed another invention," she said quietly. "Times I felt I was competing with your companies for your attention, a competition I couldn't win." Her words were reflective, not accusatory, offered as observations rather than attacks. This wasn't a confrontation but an attempt to understand. Musk, in turn, described the challenge of balancing world-changing ambitions with family life. He acknowledged that during pivotal moments of her growth, his focus had indeed been elsewhere. But he also shared his genuine belief that his work would build a better world for her generation, and that the sacrifices, though painful, served a greater purpose. "I thought you were rejecting everything I stood for," he admitted. "That hurt more than I expected." "I was rejecting being defined by your vision," Vivian gently corrected. "That's not the same as rejecting you." As their conversation unfolded, something remarkable happened. Two people accustomed to certainty in their respective domains found themselves on the humble ground of reconciliation, where rigid stances had to soften to make progress. The office darkened as they spoke, and neither moved to turn on the lights. There was something fitting about this twilight conversation, occurring in the liminal space between day and night, between estrangement and connection. "I remember when you were 9, Musk said, "you built that elaborate marble run through the house. You worked on it for days, tweaking each section until the timing was perfect." Vivian looked surprised that he recalled it. "You helped me calculate the angles for the steeper parts. You were frustrated because the marbles kept jumping the track at the same spot, and you showed me it wasn't about making that section perfect on its own. It was about how it connected to the sections before and after. Vivian fell silent, processing the memory. I guess I've been thinking about connections ever since. These small shared memories built tentative bridges across years of distance, not enough to erase the pain, but enough to remind them of good moments they could build upon. The turning point came when Vivian revealed the true reason for her visit. I've been offered a fellowship after graduation, she said. To work on sustainable housing solutions for communities displaced by climate change. She took a deep breath before continuing. I can't ignore the irony that after years of distancing myself from your work, I've ended up in a field that intersects with it. Different approach, but the same fundamental concern for humanity's future. Then came the statement that momentarily froze Elon Musk. I'm not asking for your help or your connections. I just wanted you to know that, despite everything, some of your values did take root in me. The belief that problems have solutions, that innovation matters, that the future isn't something that just happens, it's something we create. She paused. Those values are part of my foundation, even if the house I'm building looks different from yours. The words hung in the air between them. For Musk, whose companies were always an extension of his vision for a better future, hearing that his most personal legacy, his influence on his child, had endured despite their differences was unexpected and profound. For a man whose life was defined by forward momentum, the next breakthrough, the relentless push toward the horizon, this moment demanded something different, the ability to be present with both the pain and the possibilities of the past. When he finally spoke, his words were uncharacteristically simple. I'd like to learn more about your work, he said. Not to steer it or change it, but just to understand. It was a small breakthrough, but a genuine one, a beginning, not a completed bridge. They talked until the office grew dark, the city lights flickering on below. To a passerby, they might have appeared as mere silhouettes conversing, unaware of the careful reconstruction happening within. Their discussion spanned a wide range of topics, from architecture to memories, from professional aspirations to personal regrets. Vivian described her vision for buildings that serve communities rather than egos, working with natural systems rather than imposing on them. Musk shared insights from his own journey as an innovator, discussing failures and successes, lessons learned through trial and error. I've always believed in first principles thinking, he told her, breaking problems down to their fundamental truths and building up from there. It seems you're applying the same approach, just to different questions. Vivian nodded. Buildings are ultimately about people. The best designs remember that technology serves human needs, not the other way around. There was a gentle critique in her words, and Musk heard it. His own work had sometimes been accused of prioritizing technological advancement over human considerations. But instead of becoming defensive, he felt curious. Show me how that works in your community center, he said, pointing to the portfolio. She walked him through each design choice, balancing technical innovation with human experience. Musk began to see his daughter not just as a family member, but as a fellow creator with a valuable perspective of her own. They didn't resolve all their conflicts or reconcile every difference. Such complex restoration couldn't be achieved in a single evening, but they established something crucial, the possibility that estrangement wasn't their only path forward. As Vivian prepared to leave, Musk asked if he could keep one of her design sketches, not one needed for her final presentation, but an early draft. Why this one? She asked, noting it wasn't the most polished or complete version. It depicted the building from above, with multiple revisions and corrections visible in the layers of the drawing. Because it shows the evolution of your thinking, he replied. The changes you made, refining your vision. It reminds me that adaptation isn't failure, it's how good design becomes great. Vivian realized he wasn't speaking only about architecture. She carefully removed the sketch from her portfolio and handed it to him. It's not perfect, she cautioned. Neither are we, he replied. But that's not the point. As she gathered her things to leave, there was an awkward moment. Should they shake hands? Hug? How do you conclude a conversation that began to heal years of separation? In the end, Vivian simply extended her hand, and Musk gave it a brief shake. "Thank you for coming," he said, "and for your courage." "Thank you for listening," she replied. "Truly listening." As she turned to go, Musk added, "I'd like to see the building when it's finished. If that's okay." Vivian paused at the door. "I'd like that," she said, and left. In the months that followed, father and daughter embarked on the painstaking work of rebuilding their relationship. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface. But they didn't give up, finding in their shared respect for thoughtful design an unexpected metaphor for the relationship they were reconstructing, one that honored both their original foundation and the necessary renovations to make it functional for who they had become. Their initial meetings were cautious and structured. They met for coffee or lunch, usually in neutral spaces, and spoke mostly about professional matters, her final school projects, his company's developments that overlapped with her interest in sustainable design. These conversations provided a safe territory, allowing them to establish new patterns of interaction without immediately delving into more painful topics. Gradually, however, the boundaries softened. Vivian attended her graduation ceremony and, to her surprise, found her father sitting quietly at the back of the room, making no demands on her special day but simply there to witness it. She introduced him to her professors without explanations or apologies, a small but significant acknowledgement of his place in her life. Musk, for his part, invited her to tour one of his facilities developing sustainable building materials. He introduced her to the team not as his daughter, but as an architect with relevant expertise, respecting her professional identity rather than defining her through their relationship. These small steps laid the groundwork for deeper conversations that eventually addressed the years of separation, the hurt on both sides, and the complex journey of parents and children who are both strong-willed and driven by their own visions. 6 months after Vivian's unexpected visit to his office, they sat together in a small cafe near her new apartment. She had begun an internship, working with a team designing housing solutions for coastal communities threatened by rising sea levels. The work was challenging but fulfilling, blending her architectural training with a deep commitment to serving vulnerable populations. "We're facing resistance from local authorities," she said. "They're used to traditional construction methods and materials. Our designs are too different from what they're willing to approve." Musk nodded, familiar with the challenges of innovation within established systems. Regulatory frameworks always lag behind technological possibilities. "Exactly, and meanwhile, these communities remain at risk while we debate building codes." Her voice carried frustration but also determination. Musk recognized in her the same energy that had helped him overcome countless obstacles in his own work. "What if," he suggested cautiously, "you invited some of those officials to see successful implementations elsewhere? People often need to see something with their own eyes to believe in it." Vivian considered the idea. "That could work. But we'd need to fund their trip, and our budget is already tight." Musk hesitated, aware of the delicate balance between offering help and overstepping. "I know you didn't want my connections or resources," he said. "And I respect that. But if it would help the communities in need, not just advance your career, my foundation could potentially fund something like that." He watched her face, gauging her reaction. Their renewed relationship was still fresh, the trust between them fragile. Would she see this as an attempt to take control, to impose his way? But Vivian surprised him. "That's actually a good idea," she said. "It's not about the partnership, it's about getting those homes built for the people who need them." She gave a slight smile. "I can set aside my pride if you can set aside your need to control the outcome." It was a gentle challenge, an acknowledgement that they were both working on change. Musk chuckled softly. "Deal." This collaboration, limited in scope but significant in trust, marked a new phase in their reconciliation. They were finding ways to connect not just as father and daughter healing old wounds, but as two professionals with complementary skills and shared values. For Elon Musk, whose life had been defined by creating the unprecedented and achieving the seemingly impossible, this reconciliation was perhaps his most meaningful innovation, reimagining a relationship that many, including perhaps himself, had considered permanently broken. The sketch Vivian gave him took pride of place in his office, not as a trophy of reconciliation achieved, but as a humble reminder of the ongoing work, the careful, continuous shaping of a relationship between a father and daughter who had found their way back to the drawing board. He framed it simply, without embellishment, and hung it where he could see it daily. On particularly stressful days, he would study the sketch, noting how certain elements had been tested and discarded, how others were refined through repeated iterations, how the most elegant solutions often emerged from the toughest constraints. Colleagues occasionally asked about the architectural drawing in his office, curious about its significance among rocket models and engineering awards. Musk would simply say it was a project that mattered to him personally, a rare admission for a man known for keeping his private life separate from his public persona. Nearly a year after their reunion, Vivian invited her father to the opening of her first completed project, a modest community center on the outskirts of a city recently devastated by wildfires. Though small compared to his world-changing endeavors, it was a significant milestone for a young architect just starting her career. The ceremony was simple, a ribbon cutting, speeches from community leaders, and tours of the new facility. Musk stood to the side, giving Vivian her well-deserved moment in the spotlight. He watched as she engaged with the community members who would use the space, noting how attentively she listened to their reactions and feedback. Later, as they walked through the building together, he saw how her sketched ideas had transformed into physical reality, the central atrium filled with natural light, the flexible spaces already being adapted for various community needs, the sustainable systems operating quietly and efficiently in the background. "What do you think?" Vivian asked, a hint of vulnerability in her question. Despite all her confidence and independence, his opinion still mattered to her. "I think it's incredible," he said honestly. "It addresses problems I wouldn't have even thought of, in ways I wouldn't have considered. That's what innovation should do." They paused by a window overlooking the garden, where children were already playing, a space immediately claimed and enjoyed by its intended users. "You know," Musk said thoughtfully, "I've dedicated my career to trying to change the world through technology. I always believed the right innovations could solve humanity's biggest problems. And they can," Vivian acknowledged. "But not in isolation." "Exactly. I'm learning from you that the most important innovations might be the ones that help people connect, with their communities, with the natural world." He gestured to the scene before them. "This building does that." For those who eventually learned of this private evolution, it became a powerful reminder that even the most forward-thinking among us must sometimes pause their march ahead to nurture the human connections that give their vision its deepest meaning. News of their reconciliation emerged gradually, not through a public announcement, but through the natural observation of those who noticed Vivian's occasional presence at events tied to her father's work, or Musk's quiet support for initiatives linked to her fellowship. For a family that had faced its share of public scrutiny and private conflict, this renewed relationship remained largely their own, not hidden, but not displayed for others' approval or judgment either. They learned to value the need to shield the delicate work of rebuilding their connection from the harsh glare of public attention. Yet those close to them could see the positive shifts. Musk seemed more balanced, more inclined to consider the human dimension of his technological ambitions. Vivian found a way to honor the innovative spirit she'd inherited while staying true to her human-centered values and identity. Their story became a quiet inspiration for others facing similar estrangement, a reminder that even the deepest rifts can potentially be bridged with courage, honesty, and a willingness to see the human needs beneath rigid positions. As Vivian's career progressed and Musk continued his world-altering work, their relationship evolved into one of mutual respect and genuine affection. They didn't always agree, their approaches to changing the world remained distinctly different, but they learned to value those differences rather than see them as threats. At times, they even collaborated on projects where their interests aligned, sustainable housing initiatives that could benefit from both her human-centered design approach and his technological innovations. These collaborations were carefully scoped, with respect for their individual professional identities. This concludes our narrative journey. I trust you found this gripping saga of intrigue, cutting-edge innovation, and astonishing discoveries captivating. From where are you tuning in today? I'm curious to learn which corner of the globe this tale has touched. If this escapade held your interest, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for a steady stream of compelling, mind-expanding stories just like this one. Fresh material is posted frequently, ensuring you're always in the loop for the newest spellbinding adventures. Be sure to pass this video along to your loved ones and friends. It's a great way to share positivity and insight while expanding our circle of story enthusiasts. Your encouragement is invaluable. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to welcoming you back for the next tale.